Ever walk into a room and feel something change, but you can't explain why? Not the lights, not the furniture, just something in the air. Heavier, warmer. Like whatever just happened in there, you weren't supposed to see it. That's what happened to me. I caught him in a moment I didn't expect, and I helped. But I've replayed it 100 different ways since. And some nights, when the house is quiet and the walls feel too close, I still ask myself, what did I actually help him do? I wasn't looking for anything. Not drama. Not connection. Just trying to get through the day like everyone else. Dishes. Work. Fold the laundry. Smile when it hurts. Sleep when you can. And act like it's enough. But that night, something changed. And I swear, it started with silence. Not the good kind, like peace, but the thick, heavy kind. The kind that wraps around your chest and makes it harder to breathe, even when you're alone. I opened the garage door. And there he was. Back turned. Shoulders low. Fingers clenched like he was holding something back that might break him if he let it go. I didn't say a word at first. I just stood there, watching someone I thought I knew, someone I lived with, fall apart in a place where no one was supposed to see. And in that split second, before I could think, before I could reason, before I could remember what lines shouldn't be crossed, I stepped toward him. I touched his shoulder. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He just let me. Now, before you think you know where this is going, trust me. I didn't know either. Because sometimes the danger isn't in the kiss. It's in the conversation before it. The silence that dares you to fill it. The shared grief that makes two people feel like maybe they were meant to meet in their brokenness. And the worst part? Helping someone can feel so right in the moment, you don't even realize what part of yourself you're losing until it's gone. It's been 2 years since that night. 2 years since I told myself I was just being kind. But I still wonder, was it kindness? Or was it weakness dressed up in good intentions? And if you're still listening right now, if something in your gut is stirring, even a little, then maybe you've been there too. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. These stories aren't just told. They're lived. Our house isn't broken. Not on the outside. It's clean. Quiet. The grass is cut. There are family photos on the hallway wall, me, Daniel, and Mason. Smiling like we remember how to. But inside, it's a museum. Everything where it should be. Everything untouched. And everyone pretending not to notice the dust settling between us. I'm 38. Married for 9 years. And most days, I feel like a shadow moving through my own life. Daniel's still kind. Still says thanks when I cook. Still asks if I've seen his blue tie. But his eyes stopped seeing me years ago. He works late. Every night. And when he comes home, he smells like coffee and silence. We sleep beside each other, but he always turns his back first. That quiet turn, it says more than any fight ever could. Then there's Mason. 21. My stepson. He moved back in after his mom passed 3 years ago. Grief did something to him. It pressed him down, folded him in on himself. Now he walks like he's trying not to take up space. He doesn't talk much. Doesn't eat with us. Just slips in late, closes the door to his room, and disappears. I try to ask where he's been. He just shrugs. Daniel never asks. Maybe he doesn't want to know. Maybe that's the only thing we still agree on. Every morning looks the same. I stand by the window, sipping cold coffee. Rain tapping gently against the glass. The sound fills the silence Daniel and I leave hanging in the air. I hear Mason's footsteps around noon. He always sleeps late. Never comes down unless I call him. Even then. Sometimes he doesn't answer. But last week, something changed. I passed by the hallway, just after dinner. The dishes still in the sink, Daniel on another call upstairs. And there was Mason, standing in front of the mirror. Not fixing his shirt. Not adjusting his hair. Just standing there. Staring. Not at himself, but through himself. Like he saw someone I couldn't. And for a moment, I didn't see a grown man. I saw a lost boy. One no one ever came looking for. I almost said something, but I didn't, because I knew that look. I'd worn it too. And when two ghosts pass each other in the same hallway, sometimes silence feels safer than recognition. It started small, barely noticeable at first. Little things. Mason used to slip past me like fog, invisible, weightless, gone before I could even ask how his day was. But lately, he lingered. Not long, not obviously, but just enough for me to feel it. He'd stand in the kitchen doorway while I dried the plates, say something low about class or the rain or the price of gas. And before I could answer, he'd already be halfway up the stairs. He never waited for a response. But I gave one anyway, to the silence. And maybe I started answering more than his words. Maybe I was answering the ache in his voice, the one I knew too well. Then came that night. I couldn't sleep. Again. Daniel was snoring lightly, back turned, as always. The house felt too still, like it was holding its breath. So I went downstairs. No reason. Just, something told me to move. That's when I heard it. Faint, but raw. A sound I hadn't heard in a long time and yet knew immediately. Crying. Not loud. Not dramatic. The kind you try to bury. The kind that slips through anyway. I followed it to the garage. And there he was. Back to me. Shoulders shaking. Hands pressed to his face like he could stop the grief from spilling out. I stood there, just watching, heart pounding like I was intruding on something sacred. Part of me wanted to turn around, give him his space, let him hurt in peace. But my feet didn't move, and before I even thought it through, I opened the door. The soft creak startled him. He turned slightly, wiped at his eyes too quickly, like he needed me to believe he was fine. He wasn't. I didn't ask what was wrong, didn't press, didn't pretend I could fix it. I just stepped close and rested my hand on his shoulder. "You're allowed to miss her," I said. I don't know if it was my voice shaking or his breath catching, but something inside that space cracked. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just let my hand stay there. That silence between us, it said more than Daniel had in months. I went back upstairs and lay beside a man who didn't even notice I'd left. But my mind stayed in that garage, with Mason, with the heaviness, with the closeness I wasn't expecting. And the next night, I listened again. Not for danger, not for drama, just for that same quiet cry, that echo of something honest. And when I didn't hear it, I missed it. I told myself it was maternal, that I was just being there for someone who had no one. But I started questioning myself in ways I hadn't before. Not out loud, not even in full sentences. Just in moments, in passing thoughts I pretended not to notice. When I heard Mason walking down the stairs, I'd pause whatever I was doing, just to catch his eye, just to say hey like it mattered. And when he answered, when he nodded or smiled even a little, something in me lit up. Not like fire, more like a flicker, the kind you protect with cupped hands. I didn't know what that said about me, but I knew what it said about what I was missing. I had a husband, but I hadn't been held in years. Not really. Daniel slept like a stone. Still. Cold. He asked about errands and bills, but never about me. He never noticed the new candle on the table. Never asked if I was okay after crying in the shower. Never looked at me like he once did, like I was something worth reaching for. So when Mason looked up from his cereal one morning and said, "Thanks for always making breakfast," I felt that flicker again. Small, warm, dangerous. I started waiting for his voice, the sound of him clearing his throat before entering a room, the way he always looked down when he was thinking. I paid attention. Too much. And in the quiet moments, when the house felt too still, I started imagining what it would feel like. Just to be seen again. Not wanted. Not touched. Just seen. To be someone's comfort. Someone's reason to speak. Someone who mattered. And that scared me. Because it wasn't just about Mason anymore. It was about me. About what I'd been aching for. About what I didn't even know I missed until he showed me, without meaning to. That I was still capable of stirring something in another person. I knew what it looked like. I wasn't naive. But I also knew what it didn't feel like. It didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel reckless. It felt human. It felt like someone had reached into a locked room inside me and opened a window. And the breeze wasn't sinful. It was relief. And I started wondering, was helping him really just helping myself? The nights got quieter. Not the kind of quiet that soothes you to sleep. The kind that keeps you awake. The kind that hums beneath the walls and makes you wonder if someone else is lying awake too. Mason started talking more. Not much at first. Just pieces. Small stories. Moments that had nowhere else to go. He talked about his mother. About how she used to hum when she folded laundry. About how he never got to say goodbye the right way. About how he sometimes forgets the sound of her voice and hates himself for it. And then, he started talking about Daniel. How he felt like his father had buried her the moment they lowered the casket. Not just her body, but everything that ever connected them. How he moved on too fast. Too neatly. How Mason felt like grief wasn't something you were allowed to carry in that house anymore. I didn't defend Daniel. I couldn't. Because everything Mason said, I had thought too. One night, it got quiet again. We were sitting on the back porch. The air was thick with summer heat, but Mason was shivering. From the inside. He looked away when he spoke, voice low and uneven. She used to tell me I felt too much, that I'd need to toughen up. But you're the only one who ever let me feel anything. I didn't say anything back. I just reached up and wiped a tear from his cheek. Just one. It was instinct. Or maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe it was something else entirely. But the second my fingers touched his skin, he closed his eyes. And when I started to pull my hand away, he held my wrist. Not tight, but long. Too long. We both felt it. That invisible line we weren't supposed to be near, let alone cross. And the air changed. It got thick. Still. Heavy. Not sexual. Not yet. But intimate. Charged. Like we were standing on the edge of something we hadn't named yet. I should have pulled back. I should have said goodnight. I should have laughed it off and gone inside. But I didn't. And I still don't know if that's what he needed, or what I needed. Maybe both. Maybe neither. He let go slowly. His fingers lingering at my wrist for just a second too long. Then he looked up at me and said, "Can I show you something?" I nodded before I even asked what. He stood up, quietly. And I followed him, past the hallway where the lights were off, past Daniel's closed door, into the room where he slept, where he grieved, where he kept the things he never shared with anyone. He closed the door behind us. And in that quiet space, surrounded by shadows and sketches taped to the walls, I realized this wasn't just about Mason. It was about me. About who I used to be. And who I was becoming in that moment. And I still didn't know which one scared me more. His room was dim, quiet, not messy, but lived in. Like someone had tried to keep it neat, but grief doesn't leave things in order. There were sketches everywhere. Pencil marks layered and faded. Lines that tried to hold memories together. Pages taped to the walls, some torn at the corners. He walked over to the desk, pulled out one sheet from the drawer, and held it out to me. It was a drawing of a woman, kneeling by a river. Hair loose, falling over her shoulders. Her hands in the water, as if trying to hold something that was already slipping away. I stared at it. At first, I thought it was his mother. It had to be. But then I looked closer at the jawline, the shape of the eyes, the way the mouth curved slightly at rest. It wasn't her. It was me. I couldn't speak. My breath caught somewhere in my chest. Not because I was flattered. Not because I was afraid. Because I didn't know what it meant. And then, in that stillness, he said, soft, almost ashamed of the words sometimes, I think you saved me more than she did. I froze. Something cracked open inside me. Not from the compliment. Not from the weight of it. But from the truth I didn't want to name. That I needed to be needed. That I had wanted to save someone, if only because no one had saved me. He stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. And I let him. I didn't move. I didn't think. I just melted into the warmth. The safety. The ache of being held like I meant something again. And I hugged him back. Tight. Too tight. Like I was clinging to a life raft and didn't realize I was the one drowning. It wasn't sexual. It wasn't innocent. It was something in between. It was real. It was wrong. It was ours. Then I heard it. The sound of keys falling to the floor. Daniel. In the hallway. He hadn't said a word. Hadn't opened the door. But that sound, that single, accidental moment, was enough to split the air wide open. We pulled apart like fire had licked between us. No words. No explanations. No time to make sense of anything. Just silence. And shame. And heat that wouldn't cool. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did he. And Daniel, he didn't ask. Not directly. Not with words. But the space between us the next morning was louder than any confrontation. Nothing happened that night. Except everything. And I knew, the moment I saw my face on that sketch, the moment his arms wrapped around me like a prayer, the moment Daniel's keys hit the floor, I knew we had all crossed something. Not a line. A point. One you can't come back from. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, because the most powerful stories are the ones we almost never tell. After that night, everything got quieter, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. This was the kind that presses against your ears, makes you feel like you're underwater in your own home. Mason started pulling away again. He went back to late nights, closing his door behind him before I could say anything, disappearing like he'd never opened up in the first place. When we crossed paths in the hallway, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He'd mutter a quick, "Hey," and keep moving. No more long silences. No more drawings. Just space. Heavy space. Daniel changed, too. Not in big ways, but in the small, sharp ones that cut deeper than they should. He started coming home earlier. Closing his laptop at 6. Asking questions he never asked before. What did you do today? Was Mason around? He'd ask them casually. Too casually. But his eyes held something else. Something. Watching. He didn't say it. But I felt it. He knew. Or maybe he didn't know. Maybe he felt it the way animals sense storms. No proof. Just instinct. I tried to act normal. Tried to clean the house, cook the meals, fold the laundry, like I wasn't hearing that moment replay in my head on a loop. But I was. Every time I touched a soft t-shirt, I'd feel the fabric of Mason's hoodie under my fingers. Every time I washed a plate, I'd see his drawing in my mind. Every time Daniel stood beside me, I'd hear those keys hit the floor. I started having dreams, not vivid ones, just fragments. His arms around me, that look in his eyes, the porch light slanting across the floor, and sometimes I'd wake up with tears on my face, not from guilt, but from something sadder. From the ache of being seen, and then erased. The house shifted. Daniel would linger near me in the kitchen, his hand hovering near mine, but never touching it. Mason would stay upstairs for days. Sometimes I'd hear him pacing at night, and I'd press my palm to the wall, wondering if he was doing the same on the other side. We became strangers again. Familiar ones. But strangers still. And I was stuck in the middle. Not wife. Not mother. Not anything I could name. Just haunted. Then one afternoon, I walked into the bedroom and saw something folded neatly on my pillow. A single piece of paper. No envelope. Just my name, written in Mason's handwriting. Small, careful. Like every letter had been rewritten until it was just right. I stood there for a long time, not touching it, just looking, because some letters don't open doors. They closed them. And something in me knew, once I read those words, I'd never be the same again. My fingers shook as I unfolded the letter. Not out of fear, but because I already knew deep down that whatever it said would stay with me. The words were short, simple, written in that same small handwriting he always used when he cared too much about how it would come across. I didn't mean to make you feel like that. I was broken. You saw me. That was enough. I read it once, then again, like it would change. But it didn't. It just sank in deeper each time, like water in a cracked floorboard. Quiet. Permanent. I didn't cry out of guilt. I didn't feel guilty for hugging him, for wiping his tears, for letting myself feel alive. I cried because of the grief. Grief for what I did. Grief for what I almost did. Grief for who I was becoming, in the absence of being loved. Because I had spent years sleeping beside someone who never really saw me. And all it took was one moment of being recognized to make me forget what lines were meant to protect. That letter, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't a confession. It was a release. His, and maybe mine too. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like standing at the edge of something I wasn't brave enough to name. I folded the letter slowly, pressed it between the pages of a book no one ever reads, and placed it back on the shelf. I've never spoken about it. Not to Mason. Not to Daniel. Not even to myself. Not in words I'd say out loud. But it replays in my head. Every day. That moment. His voice. Those 4 lines that held more honesty than years of marriage ever had. And sometimes I think, maybe I was never the villain in this story. Maybe I was just the mirror. The one that showed him who he was when no one else would look. The one that reminded him he was still capable of being held. But mirrors, they don't make things. They reflect. And no one ever thanks the mirror for telling the truth. They just look away, ashamed of what they see. And I can't blame him for that. Because I've looked away too. Every morning. Every night. Pretending the reflection didn't change me. But it did. Quietly. Permanently. Have you ever crossed a line? Not out of lust, not out of impulse, but because for 1 second, just one, it felt like the only way to feel real again? Not whole. Not healed. Just alive. Because I did. And I've been holding that second in my chest ever since. Like a breath I never fully let out. It didn't wreck my marriage. It didn't explode into scandal. It didn't lead to anything you'd call affair. But it changed everything. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't what you do. It's what you feel. And what you can't ever let yourself forget. I'm not asking for judgment. I'm not asking you to choose a side. I'm not even asking for understanding. I'm just asking, have you ever felt that hollow? The kind that makes you lean toward someone just because they're leaning too? The kind that doesn't ask permission, just finds its way into your arms and stays with you long after they let go. If you've ever felt that, even once, tell me below. Not for validation, but because maybe if we say it out loud, it won't haunt us the same way anymore. And if this story touched something in you, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. The next one might echo even closer to home. Some stories don't end with explosions, or confessions, or consequences. Some just settle. They take root inside you, growing quiet vines around your memory until they're part of who you are. I never told Daniel. I never saw Mason cry again. We all just kept walking forward, like we hadn't brushed against something we couldn't name. But some nights, especially when the house is still, when the sun has just dipped and the mirrors go dark, I see her. The woman I was. The one who reached out to comfort. The one who clung too tightly. The one who meant well, but didn't know where the line truly was until it had already been crossed.